Welcome to this placement overview scrutiny committee. Before I start, good afternoon and welcome to this meeting of the Place Overview Committee. I'm obliged to inform you that this meeting is being live streamed and recorded. Members of the public will be able to view this meeting using the link on the agenda. Thank you. Amanda. Apologies.
Yes, we've got apologies from Joyce Barrow, and Peter Broomhall is substituting for her, and we have apologies from Paul Wynne, and Roy Aldcroft is substituting for him.
Thank you. Those substitutes. Any disposable and pecuniary interest, please make us aware either now or as we go through the meeting. And minutes of the previous meeting. Any issues with the previous meeting minutes? Roger?
Yeah, if I can, Chairman, I didn't know I was going to be able to bring it up, but I noticed in it, it says a reference in the minutes, if I can find it, about, I've got it, on page 5, it says development of carbon baseline due to be completed by the end of March 23. It's just an update. Is it on progress then, I suppose, Chairman?
Matt.
Thanks, Chairman. Yeah, so that would be a follow-up from the LTP4 work. Yes, that is now still on progress, in transit, looking to report at the end of this month. So we are now adapting the baseline we described as being available through Midlands Connect, making it a Shropshire-focused piece of data, analysing that, and that will be our jumping-off point to develop our local transport plan.
Okay, thank you very much, Matt. There's no public questions. Members' question time. I think David Asma is going to read this out.
I haven't got it in front of me, Chair, actually.
If you want it.
If I could borrow yours, that'd be great. Thank you very much. Right, this is a question from Councillor Rob Wilson, to be read out by myself. Active Travel England is conducting a series of regional engagement sessions, termed roadshows, with officers and stakeholders across the country. When is the session for the West Midlands, who from Shropshire Council is attending? And does Shropshire Council know which local stakeholders are also attending?
Right.
Thank you, Chair. The response, at the time of this response, Shropshire Council has not yet been informed of the planned dates for the regional engagement sessions to be held by Active Travel England, nor of the wider stakeholder invite list. We can confirm, however, that key members of the Council's Active Travel and Transport Planning team will be in attendance once these sessions are confirmed, and the portfolio holder will also attend.
Okay. Thank you. And now we have an update from Andy Warren, the head of highways, and on the LED lighting programme. And quite rightly, I was involved in this at the beginning, and I know Andy's had to jump through an immense amount of hoops previously to the update he's going to give us now, basically to bring the costs into a acceptable position for the council to be in. But I'll leave you, Andy, to update us on this.
Thank you, Chair. So, I will just give a brief introduction into the report and just summarise the key points. So, from a SAILEX sort of delivery programme perspective, this programme has not been delivered as quickly or as effectively as the council would have liked. The opening of the report highlights the fact that at the time that the council was successful in receiving this money, it was not well equipped to deliver it. We were also dealing with a significant amount of failure demand around different areas. Core services were under huge pressure. That stretched resources and made delivering this programme of work very difficult. The council at that particular point had the ability through WSP to put a business case together to secure the funding, but we did not have the team available to us at that particular point to deliver it. that dysfunction had to be put right. And the focus for me when I became head of service was to sort of start to reshape what the street lighting service looked like and ensure that this programme moved forward. That's been a significant undertaking. We've had to deal with dysfunction and difficulties on a number of fronts to get this project to the point where it was credible and could be delivered successfully. I touched on the resources. You know, when we receive these pots of money, and again, this isn't free money, it's a loan that would have to be, well, is going to have to be repaid back by the council. When we receive this funding, when that money comes in, what we don't get is additional revenue funds to build the team up and provide additional staff that are needed to deliver that programme of work, which has placed us in a position where we've had to rely very heavily on consultants who, again, were not well placed, particularly to support us with this particular piece of work. The initial business case that was provided was amended. That was amended to give me, as the head of service, better control over the programme. It was amended to tighten up the governance procedures that gave us the best chance of controlling and managing it successfully. Again, the report illustrates the fact that we've already implemented a significant number of LEDs through routine ad hoc replacement as part of our general maintenance arrangements. So we still have 50% of the LEDs to replace. That is now all included in a fast track programme that kicked off on the 3rd of February and will be concluded in the autumn. I think the other thing just to mention very clearly here is that not only are we replacing the LEDs, but the premise and the whole backdrop to this particular project is energy saving. And in the current climate, that's one of the key drivers to ensure that we reduce our carbon footprint and reduce the costs of running highly inefficient and expensive SOx lanterns. We also have had to done an extensive amount of work on our asset capture to make sure that the systems that underpin the service were ready, fit for purpose and ready to absorb that information as a huge number of LEDs all got replaced at one particular time. Again, that has been a significant piece of work. Our systems and our asset register wasn't ready and prepared for that. So we've had to build all of that in, capture it in a project execution plan, pull that together and make sure that we were then ready to deliver this programme. So the report does illustrate, and again, you know, it's acknowledged there's frustration around the fact that this programme has not been delivered as quickly as it should have been, and I accept that. Unfortunately, some of it predates me in terms of how the project was set up to work. My focus has been very much on future facing in terms of trying to make sure that the project was ready and could be delivered and didn't place the council at any risk when it started to move forward in order to capture registers, make sure that we were paying the contractors appropriately for the work that had been undertaken, and most importantly, capture the energy savings that is what this programme is all about. So that's just a bit of a sort of a highlight of what's in the report, and I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Okay. Julian.
Thank you. So I must admit, I sort of skim read it, but I have read it and I've listened to you and I'm still confused. So just in very basic terms,
yeah,
what skills or capacity was missing? I'd say to what I got from you, what you said is that there was a problem with understanding the actual asset. So to me, that means for some reason we didn't have the effective spreadsheet which told us where all the lanterns were so that we could tick them off as they were done. I may have got that wrong, but that was my understanding of that. But I'm trying to get to grips with, you know, exactly what all of this means in terms of what skills were missing, so that, you know, if we have other projects in the future, we know where those gaps might be. Was it drivers? Was it electricians? Was it, you know, moving equipment about? Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, it's a broad spectrum of things. So, in terms of asset register, when the street light is replaced, we have to be able to capture what the energy being drawn from that lantern is. So when that changes, how does that then convert into our asset register? So we can then feed that back in to what we call, well, what it is called is the carbon calculator.
Right.
So without having a team and the capability around the software to make sure that we capture all of that, again, we would be potentially installing 500 a week. You know, it's a lot of information coming into this service at one time. So the asset information had to be fit for purpose. The conversion of that information into the asset register was there. Going wider than that, we had, I'll call it a team, but it was one person headed our street lighting service. So, you know, most other authorities that I'm familiar with who captured this loan arrangement and have converted it successfully had more than one people employed by Shropshire Council at that point, because you've got a range of skills that you need to be going out, validating the information, checking it. But I think fundamentally the reason there was some amendments done to that business case is because we had to use a consultant to help pull that together. I wasn't satisfied that the information in it gave us enough control. And as a service, we've been trying to develop and build in greater levels of capability and a better client structure that makes us better commissioners. At the time, that wasn't the case. So that the emphasis was placed more back on us to control and influence that, rather than the consultant who I didn't think necessarily had the skills. So, you know, when you're developing a program like this, you will have some technical expertise that is required to deliver it. But ultimately, you're trying to get as much of that money into the asset as you possibly can. So we wanted more and more money into the actual column replacements, the LED replacements as we could, and maximise the funding that was given to us. So that had to be rethought, refocused. We did some benchmarking again, as I've mentioned, and a neighbouring authority was very helpful in terms of explaining how they'd approached it. When we absorbed that information and reflected on it, that wasn't how we had approached it. So there was a reset exercise in terms of this needs to be rethought to get the maximum investment out of that funding, and we took that forward. The final element to this is supply chain and contractors. So, you know, we have through Kia access to a number of supply chain partners and approved contractors that they will utilise. Of course, you know, when local government spotted these opportunities, a lot of councils maximised the opportunity, and again that flooded the market in terms of money. So we weren't necessarily comfortable with the supply chain that we had available to us. And again, I've touched on it in the report, we were seeing a higher level of failure because we hadn't been quick enough to convert the LEDs. So more and more resources were being dragged onto routine maintenance at a time when we needed to crank up the skills and resources that we needed to do the LED rollout. So we were caught in the worst of all worlds, really. We've been able to get more supply chain partners onto the contract that we're satisfied with, and have been through a vetting process, and we've agreed terms with, and that's allowed us to get moving. So it goes right the way across the range in terms of capability, really. Does that answer your question?
I think so. But so from what you've said, the key learning is in-house capacity. Is the team?
Yeah, I don't think we can.
Wherever that might
I
be.
mean, again, just, you know, councils were looking down this road for a long time, and, you know, 10 years ago it was very much commissioning. Yeah, what we've learned through the highway service and other things that we've done, that one size doesn't fit all, and if you don't have a capable client structure, you'll leave yourself vulnerable. So we have been developing that capability in-house, and I think had we been where we are now and won that funding, we'd have been in a very different position.
Okay, thank you. Jeff, Roger and David.
Thank you. Good. 2 or 3 questions, please. Everybody keeps quoting to me there's a shortage of parts because of COVID and so on. Have we placed loads of forward orders so that there will not be a shortage of parts? That's one question.
Yeah.
2, under 613, you mentioned we've seen increased levels of failure and so on. And it mentioned 28-day repair to do the job. We're not hitting that, are we?
No.
So what sort of figures are we hitting? And my third question is, under the programme, I'm from Ellesmere, and Ellesmere didn't seem to be mentioned in the first phase 1 programme, and I complained and said, well, what's wrong with poor Ellesmere? We do need lights. And the answer was, don't worry, you will be in the follow-on programmes. I'm just wondering when phase 2 of those programmes are going to be.
Okay. So in terms of question 1, I haven't got a concern with supply and lead-in times on LEDs. There was a problem during COVID, you're absolutely right. The lantern that we are utilising, I think there's a 4-week lead-in, and we've already placed our first batch of orders for that. So I'm not concerned in terms of supply and.
Right, so we haven't got a shortage of parts.
No,
Just a flavour.
the 28-day response time, we are struggling to hit that. Generally in the winter, that's a factor anyway, because resources across the highway service are then pulled into winter maintenance activities, and we do see that impact during the winter period. So it is harder for us to hit those faults during that period. Again, we start to see the uptick now as winter maintenance comes to an end. We can get more resources, and we're currently looking at the split between resources allocated to programme works and resources allocated to reactive. But as the LED rollout comes in, we will see the failure rates coming down, and as schemes of work come in, that will knock out 2, 3, 4 faults as part of a road that has LEDs replaced on it. So, but as we head through the spring, summer, we'll be in a different position going into the winter next year. And your final question on programme is, we've got a comms plan that will start to come out very soon that will give clarity on where we're going to be and when. So everyone understands when this programme is likely to arrive.
Confident it'll be this year, do you think?
Yes.
Good.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Roger. Thank you, Chairman. Not to mince words, this is a failure by Shropshire Council, isn't it? 2017, this council started talking about replacing the SOX lamps with LED ones.
Yeah.
SOX lamps stopped being manufactured in 2018. And the SOX lamps have a working life of 3 years. So 2023, we are going to get a lot of yellow lights, which is what they are missing. And over the last few years, even though this council declared a state climate emergency,
yeah.
So this has cost a lot of carbon, but it's also actually cost the council over £1 million in revenue per year. So it is a failure, but I can't understand why it wasn't addressed earlier on. This is a scrutiny committee. We're looking at it, and it is a failure really, because a number of other authorities, even in 2017, were replacing their yellow lights by LED lights. But Shropshire Council refused to do anything at all until quite recently, and they've been replacing the yellow lights, one here, one there. It did start in one of my villages on a planned maintenance, and in the village, when you enter the village from one end, you got half a dozen lights. Then there's yellow lights, and at the other end of the village, you got another half a dozen LED lights. And intermittently through that village and in many other places, there's a white light here and a white light there, which has got to be more costly than trying to do it an area at a time, rather than just doing as they fail, because there is a problem with the lampposts as well, isn't there, with the metal inside the concrete corroding and giving problems there. So a number of lamp standards have had to be replaced for it. There is also, and I'm not sure, there is also in parts of Shrewsbury especially some old Victorian lamps. I presume they are now stopping. There was talk at one time about replacing those with normal up-to-date columns and not using the historic Victorian standards that are there now. Can we be told what is happening with that? But it's capacity, skills. Other local authorities have completed it. I read a report from Townsend and 2 years ago where they had completed and they were saving over £500,000 per year because of LED lamps. So I'm a little bit disappointed to see a report here saying that, all right, we're now putting all hands to the wheel and we're going to convert the remaining ones by the autumn. Good, but it should have been done some time ago. And really, as a scrutiny committee, we should be told why it failed in previous times not to do it. And then finally, Chairman, before I give way, and that is that when the lamps first started to go in, as I understand it, there was a part of the fitting was a remote sensor which informed the centre if the lamp failed at all, which would then save money in not having a maintenance crew doing routine checks all over during the night to check which lamps were working and which lamps weren't. Now, my understanding is that that has now been abandoned. And it's just the LED lights themselves which are going in, nothing to do with this remote sensing, so that the computer knows which lamps have failed, so that more rapid maintenance can be done and can be programmed in, rather than waiting for somebody to drive past or local residents to do it via the fix my street. But it is good news that we're going to do it by the autumn, but I'd like to know why we didn't do it before. I hear about capacity.
I'd like to just, I think Andy's pretty well answered that from the start, by apologising really. And as far as Telford goes, I just know that the landmass that we've got in comparison with Telford is just a different animal, And I can't even remember. I'm thinking back, and we've got something like 100,000 to replace.
I'll give you.
I'm sorry, Jim, but Staffordshire have completed theirs,
Okay.
and many other large counties have replaced all theirs.
Yeah, I'll answer the points that I think you've raised them with me. So, I mean, in terms of the initial point, I mean, the report, is being recognising, councillor, that this programme has not progressed as you'd like. I feel I've explained what the rationale is. I'll accept that isn't what people want to hear, but it's honest. It recognises where these failures are. But a number of authorities have progressed this an awful lot quicker, but they were equipped to catch this money and deliver it in the way that we weren't at that particular point. Plus, some of the other shortcomings in the service, that core services that had to be addressed, have all taken capacity. And the alternative was to move forward in a way that wasn't sure-footed and did not have the governance around this that it needed. So Telford and Wrekin isn't a fair comparison, because you can be anywhere in that council within 20 minutes. We've got a different proposition in Shropshire. It's a different ball game completely. And I think, knowing Telford reasonably well, when Telford Development Corporation developed it 40, 50 years ago, I dare say that they will realise that all of their assets are exactly the same time life, and they had a risk of catastrophic column failure all at one time. So I suggest that probably prompted their thinking around prioritising it. I don't know that, other than the fact that they're an urban authority and streetlights are far more of a visible aspect to their assets. So I don't know the detail around the heritage lantern, but my street lighting manager certainly will. So obviously we've got quite a reasonable amount of heritage lanterns in market towns, and I don't know. I'll have to look into the detail around that and come back to you.
David. Oh, sorry, Roger.
I'm not sure about remote sensing, whether that was up or not.
It was identified as a possible option, but my understanding was when the business case was put together originally, the business case for including that cost didn't stack up. So we would not have got the funding if we'd included that element of cost.
If I can, one last time, Chairman. I can understand in some respects why we applied for SALIX funding, but in many others, I cannot understand it, because I've been going on for a number of years about investing to save. And if we'd used our capital, which has been earning 0.5% or 1% a year, if we'd have invested our capital in this project, we'd have had payback within 4 years. So that it could have been done without SALIX. I know SALIX was 0%, and we have 3 years to pay it back after completion. It can be paid from the savings, but we could have done exactly the same using our own capital. So I'm sorry to use SALIX bidding as a reason for not doing it when we've got over £100 million cash sitting in the bank, earning bank interest. It might be going up after today to 4 or 5%. It just doesn't make sense to me when you can get a return of over £1 million a year on that investment.
Yeah, I take your point. That predates me. I don't know.
I understand, and it isn't anything about you. It's just looking at Shropshire Council and then saying we have to get our asset register in place so that we can do, and I use the word bureaucracy to get the tick box, when it's obvious to anybody in a house it saves money by putting LED lights in instead of the normal filament lights.
I think that was a cabinet decisions by some point of how the money was raised.
Can I ask why the cabinet member isn't here today?
I have no idea.
Because it was a request that they.
Sorry, I should have given his apologies at the
Okay.
start. He had a meeting arranged before he was portfolio holder in this area that he just couldn't get out of.
I didn't know that. David.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to say to start off with that street lights is one of the things I'm contacted most about at the moment. People are constantly telling me that street lights will be out, not only for weeks but sometimes months, over a year in some cases, and also that you've got places in Shrewsbury anyway which are completely black and dark at night because there's a number of street lights that failed. So this is an issue which is really engaging people and people are really concerned about. But going on, just this your report had a very familiar ring to it. I don't know when in the previous council there was a problem about the management of Kia, and particularly the way in which contracts were not being checked, and problem with confirmed, if you remember, and there was a lot of concern about the ability of Shropshire Council to manage a contract. And it seems to me we're back in exactly the same position. We're in a position where we haven't really effectively managed the contract because, you know, Kia have been the people who have been on the ground responsible for implementing the streetlights maintenance.
Yes.
And you know, they are the one factor which runs all the way through this. I mean, I know you come into it later on, but they've been there all the time. And it does seem, I do worry, you know, that we have, as I say, have yet another report from Highway saying that, you know, you're not effectively managing the contractors. And I do think, you know, I hope this is the very last one we have of this nature. But, you know, it does seem to me that we need to make absolutely certain that we have the resources to manage contracts. And, you know, particularly with new, as you said, you outlined that new secondary contractors coming in, presumably you're working to Kia, I see, and that's how it's done.
Yeah.
But again, we make sure that we are managing those, we're managing the whole thing very effectively. I know you've set up this new governance, which you outlined in the report, but, you know, I hope that we don't get to this point again, because it's really worrying. And lastly, the thing that goes at me, there are issues to do with replacing LEDs, there are issues to do with general maintenance. And I know Councillor Evans mentioned about the problem with columns. I've had issues with columns which have been demolished in road traffic accidents, and have been not been replaced. But well, I think one of them was well over a year.
Yeah.
And I just hope that, as well as sorting out this LED situation, the maintenance systems going forward are much improved, and we actually get to a situation where we can get lights fixed within the 28 days deadline.
Yeah, if I can just respond, I think you know, you raised some valid points. I mean, we've taken a long hard look at the Kia contract. It bears no resemblance to the one that we started with in 2018. We've now got a very firm grip of where they add value and where they don't. I think the differentiation, if you want to call it that, between maintenance and programs of work, we now understand a lot better. So, you know, we've ended up in a perfect storm here. With the contract is let on a fairly static set of resources. You've then seen sort of failure demand going up and up and up when a project should have been launched to deal with it, and it wasn't. That's stretched and put pressure on those resources. And, you know, when we look at the model that we've developed across the highway service, that now is sort of a living, breathing embodiment of mixed economy delivery. So we understand where the contractor add value and where they don't, where we can add value as an entity, that we can launch initiatives, self-initiate, deliver work directly, let small contracts. All of that stuff is now happening. Street lighting is catching up because of the issues that we've experienced with this project. It's not giving us the platform. So I think we're getting there. I think we do have to acknowledge that, you know, it's been a tough year for us on street lighting, but this work over the spring summer will put us into a better position, and we're already exploring opportunities around how we can deliver reactive differently.
So will be improvements, let's say,
Absolutely.
ongoing. So next
Yeah.
year at this time, we will be in a very
absolutely.
different situation.
Okay, Pamela.
Thanks. Thank you, Chair. Councillor Basma's raised some of the points I was going to raise, but it was also about the standard state of the columns. Many of them anecdotally are corroded. They've got doors missing. Doors are fastened on with cable clips. I'm just wondering, first of all, how much of the contract, it does say that it's included in the savings contract, how much, what proportion or what cost of the contract is to do with the physical infrastructure rather than the business end of the light column? Do we know, do we have inspections for safety? Because I understand there was an injury in Shrewsbury not all that long ago, where a column did fail and injured a boy, I believe. Are these inspections on a regular basis? Do we know which ones are likely to fail? When do they get done? How often is that done?
Okay.
I think that's going to ask. Yeah, it's really how often are they checked?
Yeah,
And
okay.
is there an inventory showing state?
So in terms of the columns, we've got as part of the LED rollout, we've got a process of structural testing that will accompany the work we do, and we've built into the programme a percentage of failure rates around columns. Part of the governance structure that I talked about, that's a fairly significant risk associated with that project. So if we factor in 5% column failure, if that after the first month has crept up to 10%, we've got to look at the finance arrangements around capital, and the governance in place with an operations board and a strategic board will capture that month on month, and we can then make decisions that involve finance colleagues and others to work out how we mitigate some of those risks. So structural testing is part of the programme. We have a percentage allocated for column replacement because we'll know we have to replace columns, and if that changes, we will adjust the project parameters to suit.
Okay, thank you. No more. Thank you, Andy.
Could I just
Yeah,
ask
sure,
you,
sure.
at the end of, in autumn, could Andy come back and tell us how the project's actually gone?
I think if you've not done anything, we'll be asking him back anyway. But yes, well, if Amanda can take note of that, please. Tom.
So I'm just thinking forward, and I know I've been to some of the groups as well to talk about how we might take scrutiny forward, whether we ask Andy back to come and tell us how he's got on, or whether we look at a briefing session around a wider set of updates, and then, so that could be for all members of a full session, and then if there are things like street lighting that's relevant to come back to the committee to look at the performance and progress, then we could pick it up that way.
Well, it affects every councillor, doesn't it?
Yeah, no,
I think
indeed.
it'd be good for everybody to know.
Yeah, you're happy with that answer?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay. Right, thanks, Tom. Right.
Chair, if I may, I'm going to go and say something.
All right, Matt.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, Andy, you can't go yet.
No.
I know you might want to.
Thank you.
Yes. And right, okay. Thank you for that. And yes, we will bring it back at some form.
Sure.
Okay.
Chairman, as part of the decisions then, how is it going to be phrased? We note the contents of the report and expect a report sometime during the summer, late summer to members.
I think Tom said that whether good, bad or indifferent, he's going to ask Andy back to report on various things. So it'll probably be autumn time, Tom.
Yeah, I think what I recommend, and obviously when it comes down to the recommendations in the report, as a committee, you can look at those and see whether you want to add or do more to them. My suggestion, my recommendation would be that we look at having a member briefing session that covers a wider set of points, updates on highways, so not just the lighting, but a wider set of points for you as members. So it's not in the scrutiny setting, it's like a member briefing that all members can come to. And then if there are particular issues which you want to pull out and suggest for work programme or a deeper dive, then we can bring it from there.
Makes more sense, yeah.
Okay. Happy with that. Thank you, Andy. Right. Number 7, an update on winter maintenance. So back over to you, Andy.
Okay. Yeah, so again, I'll just follow the same format really, and just and provide an insight and lift some of the highlights out of the report. So winter maintenance, we are just coming out of the existing winter maintenance season. This report links way back to a previous scrutiny report and a working group that was set up to look at some of the frustrations and concerns around the existing winter maintenance service linked to the policy, which was put in place in 2018. Those initial points that were highlighted in that working group have formed the basis of the thinking going forward. And we focused on those and other initiatives to try and improve the winter maintenance service that we've got. So we have a fixed budget for winter maintenance. The majority of that budget is taken up by plant, equipment, labour and salt. And we are trying to find headroom in that budget to launch different initiatives, which I've highlighted in the report, and I will talk you through. So just coming back to some of the findings from the working group, a number of those have again been looked at. Drainage was one, believe it or not. So that was an issue that came out in terms of concern about the existing drainage assets on the network. At that particular time, we were still sort of unpicking the arrangements in the Kia contract around drainage. Since that point, we've completely changed that service, and it again bears no resemblance to what it did when that initial working group was put in place. And one of the reasons it was raised was there was ongoing concerns about drainage, flooding, water holding on the network. Since that point, we've developed a team, and we have 4 high-powered jetty units working on the network consistently, who not only do gully emptying, they also cleanse pipes, root cut, prove outfalls, dig ditches, dig out catch pits, and we've gone from over 800, I think, customer inquiries linked to drainage to just under 300 in a fairly short space of time. And we are doing a range of interventions on the network. We've just gone through a season. Again, our inspectors cover the whole network, either monthly, bi-monthly, biannually, and we're not seeing anywhere near the same levels of drainage failures on the network that we were. So that element has been work in progress and sort of been one of the strands around highway maintenance that has improved significantly. Another issue that was highlighted quite highly was grit bins, and frustrations around filling of grit bins, missing grit bins, not being able to provide them as quickly as we needed to, and grit bins not being restocked. Since then, we've completed a full asset inventory of every single grit bin in Shropshire. I can't remember the figures, but we've got, I think, over 1,800 of them dotted around the county. Those have all been mapped, photographed, recorded. Where they were missing, they've been replaced, and a full restock was completed during the summer of last year. So we utilised a very efficient and effective way of getting all those restocked, rather than in the winter, flying here, there, and everywhere, filling them ad hoc when we got complaints. We've been able to save a significant amount of money in doing them on a planned cycle way, so we can hit lots of them in one day in a geographical area. So going into the winter, we had a far greater level of community resilience because those grit bins had been restocked and replaced. We've also launched a mini gritter trial this year, which you may have seen some coverage of on social media. Those were brought in again as a trial to see how they could support the service. They are 3.5 ton vehicles. They can be driven on a basic driving licence, as opposed to the 3.5 ton gritters that do our strategic network, which you need a HGV licence for. We've been able to deploy those very quickly using direct labour sort of resources. So the guys that are doing drainage, potholing work, of course, when it's winter's in place, it's very difficult for them to do that type of work. So we can flick those very quickly from one activity and get them out on the gritter unit. So those have been doing areas where, again, we've had vulnerabilities and the weather has impacted. So footpaths, town centres, one-way streets, car parks, areas that the existing policy doesn't cover in great detail. So those have been a range of supplementary services that we've put in place this year that again will inform our thinking ahead of next winter. We also launched a trial involving schools. So we did the first one of those last year, whereby concerns about slippy footpaths in and around schools was highlighted. And we did a trial with a school in Bridgenorth, which proved to be very successful, which we provided them push along hand spreader, gave them salt explained how they stored it, gave them PPE and some tutoring in how to utilise it. We also share our weather forecasting information, which gives the school a heads up when we're expecting ice or frost that may prove difficult, and the school can then communicate that at their discretion around advising parents of the hazards the next morning. That proved, as I said, to be very, very successful, and we rolled that out, and we've now got over half the schools in Shropshire signed up to this initiative, a number of which have used it through the existing season. And we've had an awful lot of feedback, positive, and also requesting that we expand that out to medical centres going forward, which is something that we'll be actively looking at. So generally, the service is evolving. We are finding ways to save money through efficient delivery of certain tasks. That's freeing up money to launch other initiatives that will complement the service. The mainstay of the service is the strategic gritting, which you will see the big vehicles that treat our defined network. We've had no successful claims against winter maintenance in the last 5 years, which tells me that the service is robust and we're complying with our policy. But we absolutely recognise that there's areas that the policy doesn't touch particularly brilliantly, and we've started to work more towards finding ways to improve that. This will inform the thinking around more community participation, looking at how we can engage towns and parishes. And we worked quite closely with Shrewsbury Town Council this year on the town centre when we had snow. And that will be the direction of travel for us in terms of engaging partners and see how we can deliver this service better. We sense there's a better way of engaging private contractors in local geographical areas that don't involve our teams travelling long distances, that if they are set up in a community environment, that they can deploy salt kits, whatever it is that we need to facilitate the areas that they know the community is vulnerable in. So that we generally go through a cycle of winter maintenance. We push initiatives through, we plan and prepare them through the spring, summer, bring them in during the winter, evaluate, do a wash up, and then look at what we can put in place ahead of the next winter. So it is an evolving picture, and we will continue to deliver that. Most of the services are delivered directly through Kier in terms of the bulk of the gritting that we do. However, the supplementary services have been launched by us under the control of Shropshire Council, and we have now, as I've said, learnt an awful lot from the trials that have taken place so far. And we will see where we go in terms of the next stages and what we think we can do going forward to improve the service beyond. Because I think this year we've certainly been more resilient, we've been more responsive, and we've made an active effort to be more visible in terms of social media to help publicise and communicate the work that we are doing, because it can go unnoticed. We often get complaints about roads that haven't been treated when we can categorically state that they have. We were much more on the front foot this year when we did have winter. We had what we described as a bed of salt down early, because really salting a road isn't a responsive treatment, it's preventative. The key to it is get the salt down, which gets trafficked in, creates a brine solution and a debonding layer between the snow and the road. And if you can get that in place, it does give you an awful lot of improvements into the following day when you get the bad weather. And looking at how neighbouring authorities cope, I think we've fared better. And certainly that was some of the feedback that I had this year. So there are still areas that we need to work on, but fundamentally I think the service has moved forward this year.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks, Andy, for the report. And I know you're the messenger, you're by yourself, but I was looking at the report that was done in March 22, although it isn't listed.
Yeah.
There was a report to this committee in March 22, and I've got the minutes here in April 22, and the report of that meeting was brought forward. And there are a number of recommendations that were made in March 22.
Yeah.
And I'll read out the first set. And that is, the group recommends that Shropshire Council carries a review of the defined winter network, takes a risk-based approach presents its proposals for a risk-based approach to a place overview committee and ensures town and parish councils are consulted. I see there's a reference to that in your report,
Yeah.
that it's nearing completion. No report has ever come to this committee, as far as I am aware, and I think members would wish to be involved and actually view it, because the members all know their local areas, and there are problems maybe that are inherent in that area. So I think every member will get calls every so often, as you say in the report as well, that the temperature indications now are far better.
Yeah.
So just because there's a risk of snow, you do not necessarily go out gritting, depending upon the conditions. But members are getting all sorts of calls, but that is one set of recommendations which was adopted by this scrutiny committee and doesn't seem to have taken place. So can you let us know when or if this new programme, what 28% of the roads or something like this will be on it, how we can influence that, scrutinise that if needed, but look at it with yourself before next winter.
Okay.
We'll bring that back.
I can answer that, Chair. So in terms of the report states it is due to be reviewed. You're right. In 22, it was on the list of things to be reviewed. When it says scopes, that means we've scoped what that project needs to look like in terms of evaluating the defined network and the considerations against the code of practice that need to be undertaken. We haven't started that piece of work yet, so there's nothing actually for us to consult on at this moment in time. So we haven't jumped the gun, we just haven't started that piece of work, because what you've also got to be clear on when you're starting to look at your defined network is that your depot strategy is understood. So we're now working to a 3 depot model, north, central, south. That will be the hub and spoke arrangement for how we look at our gritting routes. So we've done that piece of work, and we can now look at evaluating those routes, because that defined network is historic. It is due to be reviewed. It does need to be reviewed, but we haven't carried out that piece of work yet.
I can, Chair. So this report was dated 24th of March 2021.
Yeah.
We're now in 23.
Yes.
So it still hasn't been started.
Except
it's just been scoped.
We've still got a defined network that's linked to our policy. We have not been able to start reviewing our defined network yet.
So 2 years since this report was accepted and recommendations, it hasn't really been started.
We had a historic arrangement of depots, but we couldn't possibly evaluate gritting routes if we didn't know where we were going to be gritting from.
All right. There are a lot of other reports. There's actually 7 sets of recommendations, 6 sets of recommendations in this.
Yeah.
So are there any that have been completed?
Well, if you just evaluate which ones they are, I'll talk you through. So the ones that I've highlighted in my report are grit bins. Okay.
Yeah, that is true. Yeah, explores grit bins.
Yeah.
Number 3 is about gully cleansing.
We've covered that.
Number 4 is new snow warden schemes.
Community participation.
Aims to have this in place by winter 21-22.
Yeah.
Was it? Because we now come out of 22-23.
Yeah.
Effective customer service function.
Okay.
And then the final one was the strengthens its communications plan to include closer communication with town and parish councils.
Yeah.
I've not seen any extra communication with parish councils.
No.
You made reference about Shrewsbury Town Council, but I know there's discussions going on in some places about extra grit bins. And there is a reference in your report about working in partnership with parish and town councils and co-funding them. So are Shropshire Council still providing grit bins where parishes wish to have them and local members bring them up? Because I think it's important. And I've got 1 or 2 areas in my division which are on very steep hills, and I know the small gritter there might be able to get up there, but they do want more grit bins to go in. So is that facility still available, and is there the capital available to do it?
Okay. Yeah, I'll try and answer those questions sort of in the appropriate order. So in terms of snow wardens, when snow wardens was being looked at, there was a number of authorities that were embracing the snow warden scheme, and a number of authorities have sort of taken a different view of how that can help and support the wider service. So, you know, often they are authorities in tight geographical locations. So you've got a need to keep, you know, a close watch on some of the high ground and some of those elements. Number of authorities have now stepped away from snow wardens because, you know, ultimately you do need community participation, and that is what we are looking to try and embrace. But we're not clear, I don't think, what that looks like yet. Because, you know, if it means that we've got someone in the community who can tell us it's snowing, you know, we usually know it's snowing because we've got, you know, data, we've got information, we've got sensors, we've got people in these geographical spaces operating who can confirm that information to us. What we're looking for is a more enlightened approach that we think would benefit the community in terms of focusing on the things that matter. And I think when you look at the amount of parish councils we've got in Shropshire, we need to be clear, because I think what would work in one parish would be very different to what would work in another. So in all honesty, I think that was cited as an interest, and I understand why. It's the direction of travel for us in terms of getting more community engagement, but I don't think we're clear yet what that needs to look like.
Okay, thank you.
Grid, so you, Jim, grid bins.
Grit bins. So we have a risk assessment that we use to evaluate when we get requests in for grit bins. We get those regularly. We installed, I think, 5 last week because they met the criteria in terms of necessity. We have a stock of grit bins and we've got resources to go and put them out. So that's at no cost to parish councils at this moment in time. We just do them because we think there's a value to the local community where they're required. So those are coming in. In terms of communication, I think, you know, we recognise that we want to try and improve that. We've got a comms officer who's dedicated to the service now, who works in our office. She's been heavily involved with certainly the Facebook post that we put out during the winter. And we recognise that we weren't particularly, you know, engaging or focusing on people as customers, and that's something that we've tried to put right across the service. So we will, again, be trying to include more of that in our winter maintenance service going forward.
My last one, if I can, Chair. Yeah. Fine. Last one, you make a reference about snowplow contractors.
Yes.
Especially in the more remote areas, the narrow areas.
Yeah.
Can members just be informed of who they are in their own particular area without causing a lot of work for yourself?
Absolutely.
So that as a member, we know where they are. I understand they have to get a procurement from yourselves in order to do it. But it would be good if members actually talked with those, knew where they are, and if there was any difficulties, could come back and try to sort it out for the local community benefit.
As far as I know, through my parish councils, we've all got 2 or 3, they know who they are because they have either the historical or they've been appointed by the parish council.
It's just to make sure it's an updated list.
Yeah, I'm just
quite comfortable with that.
Is that still the method?
Yeah,
I thought
list
so.
of contractors.
Right, Julian.
Thank you. I'll start with some positives. So, first of all, I think the scheme of naming the gritters has been great. I think that's sort of, it's sort of, you know, that sort of pride of place stuff that is actually really important. I think it's been a really nice sort of initiative. I think that I'm really pleased that there was some treatment of the pavements in town centre this time. I think the last time around we had really severe weather. Day 1 was problem, but by day 2 there'd been some treatment, and that was great. I did tweet it out, but I never found out whether it was town council or Shropshire Council or a combination of both. So I'd be really interested to know, because that's been something I've sort of gone on about every single year. So it'd be interesting to know how we got there with that. And the third thing I want to say positively actually is just the level of detail that you've been answering us and been honest about the problems, and also honest about, you know, very clear about the direction of travel you're going in. I'm very grateful for that. So thank you. The additional bits, I suppose, is coming back to the thing about pavements and how the parishes and towns can help with that. But then also the businesses. So one thing I did see this time was, you know, one of the shops on Pride Hill, Superdrug, I'll name them because it's a positive thing, they actually came out and they did the work outside, you know, and I think that that's really important. And we know that historically people have been nervous. They think, oh, I mustn't do it, I'll get fined, I'll get sued if somebody falls over, all of which is nonsense. And I think we've made some progress in making that a little bit clearer on our website, but I'm not sure that we're getting the message out there in terms of the social media message to say to those businesses, look, you know, help your customers and help the town, because they, you know, there's no reason for them not to take some responsibility for that. It's really good to hear the schools initiative and the medical centres, but maybe we can start talking to some of the businesses and shops, especially on and helping them a little bit, or helping them to help each other by having maybe shared resources between, you know, on Pride Hill, for example, it used to have some shared resources where they could all pop into the shopping centre and drag out the shovels or whatever it might be, you know. So those are my things. Thanks.
I'm sure I saw something on that during the winter of you putting a post out about helping your neighbour. I'm sure there was something like that. You probably don't even know.
I think you're right about there being a level of nervousness about doing anything. And I think, you know, in terms of us trying to enable community participation, and I think there is a will in lots of instances to try and do something outside your own property. But I think you're right, people are fearful of doing it.
I used to have a shop, and honestly, you just didn't dare touch anything. That was it came down from head office.
So maybe that's something we can take away and look at. But I agree. I think if there is a will to help, then we should embrace it. And if we can help dispel some of the concerns, then that's a role we can play. So yeah, I'll take that away.
And just on the town centre story.
Yeah,
So just can you just talk us through how we got there this time?
So I spoke with Seb from the bid and the Shrewsbury Town Council through Helen Ball, and we just had an early discussion really about what was coming our way and what they could do to potentially help. And between us, we just had an open conversation about what resources they had, what we could do to support them, what we were doing in the town centre. Managers on my side and Helen's side had conversations about where we were covering, where they were covering, what the issues were on the ground, and coordinated a response really, which is, to my mind, how it should be. But I know before there's been concerns about sort of footbridges and things like that. I just want to sort of talk about that because I think that's quite important. I touched on the fact that we've not had a successful claim against the winter maintenance service in 5 years, and part of that is down to the, you know, we can all look at Keir and think where they don't come up particularly brilliantly, but one of the things that they're very, very strong on is data and information. So we obviously use our sensors and data information to trigger our response. When we respond at certain weather temperatures at the weather gauge in Shelton, we will then initiate treatment of footbridges. When we do that, we have GPS positioning data for vehicles, GPS position data for the tablets and the phones that they've got. We have photographs before, after, and site records detailing everything. So when we get a claim, we are very well placed to defend ourselves and say that we have complied against our policy. I'm really happy to start talking to town councils and parish councils about how they can support the service. But what I've got to have reassurance about is that if we share the money, they share the responsibility for data capture. So there's an honest conversation about the level that we need to get to work together on this type of work. And as we share responsibility for some of these services, can we maintain that level? And I think we've got a part to play in helping with that. On winter maintenance, in certain areas, it's a bit less critical, but in some instances, it really is. So that's part of the conversation that we're going to start initiating now and help understand what we need in order to capture that. So we need everyone working on tablets so we can get that into our asset register. So if questions ever asked, we've got the information.
Okay, thank you, David.
Yeah, thank you, Darren. I just want to back up the points that Councillor Dean was making, and also that your response. I think it's really great that you got much more involved with the community and town councils. and that we're actually, moving forward and working together. I think that's very, very excellent. Not to go over any points again, but one thing is, you mentioned in your report about you kind of doing some pedestrianised areas with these mini gritters.
Yes.
Have you got any plans to expand that? Because it's one of the things which I think most annoyed people in the past, the fact that pavements were all icy and the roads were clear.
Yeah.
So I wonder whether you can look.
Well, yeah, I mean, the purpose of a trial is, it gives you a little bit of a freedom to either accelerate or reverse, doesn't it? So, we've sort of captured how that trial has worked, how much salt they've used, how many hours we've had on the network, and what the response has been. And it's been overwhelmingly successful. So I personally can't see any reason why we won't include that in the future service. So, from my perspective, we've taken some of the team from the town council out in it. So I can see a world where at some point we load it up with grit parking and they just drive the town centre. And, you can see that working really well in the future, that we have these in geographical locations and resources that not necessarily ours or the contractors are deployed to initiate that work. So we've been really chuffed with that trial, really chuffed. So I can't see that those won't feature going forward.
Yeah, I really welcome that, actually.
Yeah.
Fantastic, sounds ideal. The last one I was making, it's a small one really, but I did complain on Fix My Street about some black ice on the road somewhere, I can't remember exactly where now. When I got the response, the ice of course and all the snow gone. so the thing has been solved, but I wonder whether when you're reporting problems with snow and ice and stuff, perhaps is there a process by which these are given priority over other things?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Roger's desperate to come in again.
Right, thanks. Yeah, it's just to say what I've been on about the highways, but can I say thank you, because when I've raised queries direct, you have been able to sort it. So I'll throw the bricks, but I also give the compliments.
We're all called Roger from now on.
No, it is. It has been. There has been a change for the improvement. But also if I can pick up about the mini critters, there's two specific areas. One of them in my division, but also one in Nick Hickman's division, which is Ponsbury Hill. Ponsbury Hill was brought up at their annual meeting 10 days ago, when Nick was faced with the question of that isn't gritted and it's a big gritters can't get up there. But it's quite narrow in places, cars coming down, people walking down, and if a car loses control, it's going to be an accident.
Yeah.
But you can't turn around a vehicle at the top, a big one, but you might be able to turn around a mini gritter at the top.
This is the road that goes to Paul's Commons.
Yes, that's it. Yeah,
Okay.
And also in my area, I have a place called Lith Hill, which is something the same, and it's almost a one in 6 in places, and it does get positively dangerous. So these many gritters, and there will be other areas, I would think, in other divisions, but to get a gritter up there, I think would be a very, very positive. Thank you, Chairman.
Jeff.
Thank you. Well, that's my turn. You've also what I was going to say virtually, which was one, thank you, which Roger said. Two, Julian said the idea of naming machines is great. I like Freddie Mercury very much indeed. Most of the complaints I had were about pavements, and I like the idea of working town and parish councils. Is there any possibility of providing town and parish councils with Freddie Mercury's so that they can actually do their own or do areas or whatever? Was going to be one question, because I think our town council would love to be able to do some stuff where people come kicking the door down. And two, I'd like to overcome the confusion of liabilities. If we encourage shopkeepers or public to do things, can we just clarify that they are litigation and actually make that point? Because that is the stumbling block. They won't do it because they're too worried against somebody who does. So if it is legal to do it, possible, maybe that's something we should do, publicise it, encourage them to do the outside of the
I think Julian, Councillor Dean, raising that point resonated with me, because it's something I've picked up on this year. I think we need to look at that and see if we can do some comms or something as part of our winter comms next year to encourage that. And
definitely, because we're confused, and I'm sure they are even more confused.
Yeah. Yeah, noted. And yeah, the other one, so I think the summary position out of the mini gritty, sorry, the push along spreaders is, again, with the mini gritty trial, we'll evaluate that and see where it goes. But I think there's lots of different ways it can be deployed. And if towns and parishes are interested in that, then that's something that
Well, I know that we would be, so I'm sure that others would follow.
We've got a big shed at which we could keep one in.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Julian.
Thank you. Sorry, I forgot one, which was about Fix My Street. That's what reminded me. So there was it was a drains issue where a drain was overflowing. It was coming back out. It wasn't on the street, and of course Fix My Street won't allow you to drop a note
Yeah.
Off the street. So, and I didn't know whether it was a Severn Trent issue, whether it was your issue, but in a way you just want to be able to report it somewhere,
Yeah.
and then it will get passed on. So what should people do when Fix My Street won't allow you to actually drop the pin because you're not on the street?
I'll take that away if I may. The reason I say that is the second phase of Fix My Street is now in process. I was at a meeting yesterday morning about the functionality elements.
Yeah.
So I mean, I won't go off piste here, Chairman, but the first phase implemented it. The second phase is refining. So
Right.
I'm aware there's some functionality, feedback loop issues, technical issues that we've captured in this second phase, and we're starting to home in on some of the user experience, shall we say, around difficulties with it. So is that problem still in existence, by the way?
Not as well. It won't be because it's not raining as heavily.
Okay.
It was on the bank behind
Behind
Shrewsbury
School.
School.
Me an email to let me
Okay.
know. I mean, hopefully I'm not advocating doing that because Fix My Street is the route we want people
Yeah.
to take, of course. But
Absolutely.
okay,
I'll do
yeah,
it.
if you let me know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Peggy.
Yes, very personal to me, this is. How on earth, you're talking about drains, that's reminded me, all the drains in which is Townsend are blocked, solid up. And then, but I can't put that and Fix My Street, else they wonder what I'm doing. Up in, on all of it.
I'll say
There was talk about us shutting the street on a Sunday for it, to go through and do
Well,
a proper
we
deep
will-
clean.
Yeah, we try to plan those around weekends.
Yeah.
We've done work in Osler Street very recently, Bridge North very recently. So it's part of the cyclical maintenance around trying to get these assets up.
Yeah.
Some of them are quite difficult. They're one-way streets, for example. So I'll take that away and
It's just
and
that when
find out where that is
it
in the
rains
program.
hard and it comes down that high street,
Yeah,
then that causes big problems. Green
Okay.
End can get flooded as well. And I
That's
just,
fine.
while I'm here. It's okay, sorry, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much indeed. And that's just a big thank you to Andy. I suppose we do all know that Andy's doing two jobs. For the amount of changes he's made in the last 2 years, while Steve Smith's been off doing his job and his own, and making a difference. So he is doing a remarkable job. So, Andy, thank you. Right. You can go if you like, Andy.
Thank you, Chairman.
I'd go on.
Go back to
Going good. Yeah.
right, thank you. Chairman.
Work. I don't know lots of fact that's going to have on the
So I guess what I'm trying to do with all the committees at the moment is rather than planning forward a lot with the work programme topics is just sort of put a bit of a marker in the sand to say that we are going through got a paper coming to council next week after the scrutiny improvement review which took place in the autumn, which will include suggesting or recommending a change to the committees, the committee structures, with a view to then being able to confirm, if those are accepted, what the membership would be in the annual council. So what I'm doing as I go around each committee for the work programming items, really just to flag that last year we did a successful sort of test of an approach to work programming. We did it over 2 workshop sessions, where the first session was identifying the topics and prioritising the topics. And then the second section was actually working through those prioritised topics and being quite clear through that work about what it was the members wanted to achieve, so what impacts they expected, who they needed to hear from, or what they needed to know about to do that. And just start to build it up quite early on. We can factor into that some of the learning from the scrutiny review and some of the feedback that I've had from members as as we've been going now, but otherwise I've been back involved in scrutiny since last June, I think it was. So it's just sort of picking up and learning, but that will be work which will be ongoing. But what I would say is expect a couple of workshop sessions in following annual council for each committee in that structure. And what I would like to do in those sessions is have a focus around how we're going to be delivering the structured plan, target operating model, any financial strategy pieces of work which are outside of that, but also involve the directors, assistant directors, other relevant senior managers and the portfolio holders. And if it's something more outward facing like health scrutiny, potentially some of the partners as well, and really try and make sure that the work programmes are anchored on what's going to be being done to deliver those priorities, but also so that we can time the topics, so that if you're going to do pre-decision scrutiny, you can make your recommendations in the time frame that those decisions are going to be taken in, and the officers, the portfolio holders and yourselves are able to plan that work in so that it's not on top of, it's part of the process. So we're building that value added from scrutiny into the thinking from the start. But yeah, it's really just to sort of say that's the plan, and hopefully it gets the same feedback as you had for health scrutiny from all the committees when we do it.
Any questions?
I was just going to throw a topic in which came up at communities yesterday, but which possibly sits with place for some sort of piece of work. And I know that Councillor Butler is not against the idea of us doing a piece of work around short-term lets and around the impact that they are having on the housing market, and what role we may have in terms of planning enforcement around change of use, and also licensing and registration. So I just wanted to throw that out there. But the other thing was, I've got my mic on. The other thing I suppose is that, you know, as the transformation project, I believe there's some discussion about what committees are doing what, but it just felt to me, I think that Councillor Kidd made the point at the last full council, that as we are going through this transformation programme with, you know, the £1 million a year consultants telling us how to save money, that each of those ideas, to me, need to go to the correct committee rather than it going to just performance management or just one, because they will affect the service areas. And it seems to me that service areas ought to be looking at that transformation programme as we go through it.
I don't think that's a bad idea at all. Each scrutiny should take ownership of their particular areas.
Yeah.
Okay. Make a note of that one.
Okay, thank you very much. Date and time of the next meeting, I think you've got it, 25th of May, and it sounds, we won't have any training before then.
25th of May, I'm not sure when annual council is, but it might be perfect timing for the first workshop session.
Okay.
So it might not be a committee.
Yeah.
But it might be the first session where it's a real chance to start to work through what it is you want to cover, or a committee wants to cover.
Okay, thank you very much, everybody. Meeting closed.
These are